What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the Season 3 finale of the Orville New Horizons, an episode that was a delightful send-off for a show that none of us wanted to see draw to a close. And regrettably, there's no news about any Season 4 coming our way. You know, all the contracts have expired. The sets have been torn down. Seth MacFarlane is making his show based on the movie Ted and Ted 2. And who knows, but if we never see another episode of The Orville again, and that would make me very sad, but if we never do, this episode works as a proper send-off where, spoiler alert, last warning, 3, 2, 1, even fucking Alara Katan, I never quite knew how to say her name correctly, but Halston Sage came back for a little cameo, which just floored me. I mean, anyway, it's funny how when she left, I was like, the show will never recover. She's so amazing. Like, how can the show go on without her? But the show just kept getting better and better and better. But bringing her back, that was obviously an excellent decision on their part. And so much about this episode was about them obviously saying goodbye, tying up loose ends. And there are plenty of loose ends that have been not tied up. I mean, as this episode proved with the character of Lysella, they've done a brilliant job of tying this season into really old episodes. At first, I had to kind of rack my brain. I was like, wait a second, what fucking planet are we talking about? What story are we talking about? And then I looked it up. And anyway, season 1, episode 7, when Lamar got in all kinds of trouble for dancing, and we saw that culture that basically just reminds us of like Twitter on steroids or TikTok or social media on steroids. And it would be great if we could say that in the 5-year interim since that episode aired that we've solved all those problems. But no, things are just as bad online as they've always been. And I doubt that situation will change until we as human beings also evolve and change. Or just some new technology comes along that either is better or worse, but something will come along that'll make social media seem very passé at some point. Even though I have made a lot of friends through social media, so we shouldn't always throw out the baby with the bathwater. In any event, this episode was called Future Unknown. Very ominous title. Obviously, you can read into that however you like, and it was written and directed by Seth MacFarlane, which is obviously very appropriate. This is his baby. And between Family Guy and Ted and all these other things he's been associated with, he's had an amazing career so far, but I think nothing comes close to just the heartwarming emotion of the Orville. In general, I can't stand heartwarming emotion. I'm a very cynical guy in a lot of ways, but this show just melts my heart over and over and over again, makes me misty-eyed, gives me chills. It's almost embarrassing how emotionally attached I am to all these characters and the jokes, the humor, the action beats, the drama, the look of the show. It took them a little while to, like cutting diamonds, to kind of hone it to perfection. And I feel like the show now is almost unrecognizable compared to that pilot back in the fall of 2017, the pilot that was directed by Jon Favreau. And it took them a little while to really figure out what the heart and soul of the show was going to be, but goddamn, they just nailed it. In the years to come, I would like to believe that people will continue to jump on board the same way people jumped on board Star Trek. Star Trek was famously canceled after 3 seasons, but it was in the early 70s when the show was in syndication and the animated show came out that the audience just kept growing and growing and growing. And it took people a couple of years to really appreciate what they had missed when it was staring them square in the face. But obviously we live in a completely different media landscape now. I mean, just the deluge, the fire hose of content that's in our face all day, every day. It's very easy to see shows and movies just disappear into just this constant stream of white noise and insanity. But I would like to believe that a show with this much creativity and imagination and sincerity and heart and soul and humor, that it's too good to be denied over time. So let's talk a little bit about what made this episode so goddamn good. So the episode opened with a song that I was unfamiliar with, or at least if I am familiar with it, I don't remember where I last heard of it. Bachelor in Paradise, which is an old MGM musical tune, but we could basically get this montage of Isaac performing various duties around the Orville. And then we get maybe the funniest scene that I expect we'll see all year on either the big or the small screen, because we get to see this Moclian ritual, a ritual of renewal of mating vows. And I don't even know if I can describe it without falling out of my chair. But we see how the the powers that be on the Orville are going to get to watch Bortus as he chases Clyden through the woods, and Clyden has to run hard. It has to be a legit chase. He has to make him earn it. But if, as Bortus says, if I catch him, we will share the sexual event. I might have to use that line in the future, but only with fellow Orville fans. And then when he says that I must take him, it reminded me a little bit of Grace Jones and Conan the Destroyer. Admittedly, not a very good Conan movie, but that scene where Grace Jones is talking about grab him, take him, like that.
Suppose you set your heart on somebody. What would you do to get him?
Grab him and take him.
You grab him and take him.
Take him. Like that.
I mean, anyway, I guarantee you Seth MacFarlane, as a young man, saw Conan the Destroyer many times, and part of that scene must have been in the back of his brain when thinking about these lines for Bortus. But watching them hauling ass through the woods, wearing their little, I don't even know, whatever the little girdles were, or little diapers, whatever the case might be, goddamn. I mean, and if you saw it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was funny as fucking shit. And then, like I mentioned before, we got a massive callback to season 1 when they return to Sargas 4 just to check on how things are going, and they get a message from Lysella who says that things are worse than ever with all the upvotes and downvotes, etc. And she's ready just to cut and run and leave her planet behind forever. And a huge chunk of this episode was all about her second thoughts when she realizes that she's having the equivalent of like survivor's guilt, because she realizes that while she is basically going into this paradise, well, what she regards as a utopia, everyone behind her is going to continue to suffer. Just normal things like lack of access to clean water, or just the hell and torment that every society experiences as it evolves, changes, and grows and develops new technologies. I'm going to see how it gets so bad at certain points where she even tries to steal technology for the synthesizers and things like that, because she recognizes even just one synthesizer could completely change the fate of a country. And we get one of those classic Star Trek philosophical debates about to what degree should you try and be like a missionary versus an observer, where even people with the best of intentions, and I feel like this is when the show is just so goddamn brilliant, how it shows how people who think they are good, people who have the best intentions, can sometimes do incredible harm just due to blind spots through no fault of their own, where years ago, the Union came to a world and offered to help them and offer them technology, and 9 billion people died, and it was reduced to this ravaged radioactive wasteland. And it takes an alarming example like that, but it reminds me a little bit of like the Watchers in Marvel Comics. That we learn how the Watchers, the reason they watch, it's because they tried to intervene with different populations, went horribly wrong, and they ended up getting a lot of people killed. And like as the old expression goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But part of the magic of this show is that they're able to deliver these messages without clubbing the audience over the head, without sounding preachy. I mean, we live in an era where in the world of entertainment, there are people who preach and preach and preach to the point where even if they're preaching something you agree with, you just want to fucking vomit and never listen to them ever again. It's that kind of moral vanity that a lot of people have embraced due to social media that is just, for me, utterly repugnant. And it's a very fine line, but somehow, or maybe just because this show confirms whatever biases that I already cling to, but I feel like this show does a brilliant job of delivering a positive message without coming across as preachy. And I think the reason it comes across as positive to me so frequently, it shows how even societies like the Kalons and the Union, which a year ago were trying to just mow each other down and to utterly destroy each other, how they can overcome those differences and attend a wedding together. And it's a message that I find very refreshing in this disgusting era that we live in, an era that Lysella would find very, very familiar. I feel like if you can't recognize that even your most hated enemy has a lot in common with you, then perhaps you need to pause for a little self-reflection. But the A plot in this episode is all about Dr. Finn and Isaac finally tying the knot and all the various drama and comedy that kind of spills over as a result of their deliberations and then eventually their decision, like when Lamar offers Isaac some unsolicited advice about how he needs to maybe play the field and date some other women, and Isaac immediately asks Lamar if he wants to go for a date. And then he walks into Kelly's office and suggests that they get down and dirty then and there. And anyway, I was howling with laughter throughout this episode. I guess if you were to criticize this episode, you could say that it's got an alarming lack of tension, suspense, or stakes. But I think we can forgive this episode for the lack of suspense and tension because this is very clearly a send-off. It's a placeholder. They're not going to end this season on some giant cliffhanger that has people pulling their hair out for the next 5 years. But there are certain storylines that I would like to see. That I would like to see them return to, like episode 2, that guy who basically got turned into a demon and then sent off into space. I want more of that, but obviously we will have to wait for a long time. But getting back to the wedding, we had some funny bits, like when Claire is forced to explain to Isaac the idea of monogamy, and she's basically screaming at somebody who is completely incapable of feeling emotion, but he is capable of acknowledging error and message received, message acknowledged, as he would say. And then she dresses down Lamar, and he's like, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." I mean, he knows when he's in the wrong, and he takes his talking to. And anyway, it was a proper chewing out. And then I guess the real wrinkle with all these wedding shenanigans is when initially Malloy is asked to be the best man, and Bordas, who feels a little competitive rivalry with Malloy, just says, "I will be your best man. I will speak." He just kind of stampedes over it, resulting in one of the lamest bachelor parties in human history. He dresses up as Elvis. The party is dead. None of the shenanigans you want to see at a bachelor party, whereas the girls, they kind of get down. They get totally hammered. They're dancing and singing, and they program the simulator to have a proper strip tease, courtesy of a Kalon for Claire, and it's just a very lively party all around. But I think my favorite kind of speed bumper mishap related to the wedding is when Isaac calls up Primary and tells him that he's getting married. Primary says it sounds a lot like slavery, but he's like, no, it's like, mutually beneficial in a lot of ways. And the whole goddamn planet ends up coming. 4,000 Kalon vessels show up. And you could this is when the show is at its most delightful because it's totally leaning into and embracing the strangeness and otherworldliness of this different society, this different planet, this different culture, and how something as simple as a wedding and inviting a few guests can lead to all these crazy unintended consequences where it almost looks like there's yet another invasion happening. That was absolutely delightful. And then seeing them mingle at the party was a lot of fun. And as I mentioned before, obviously, seeing Alara come back, that was just so goddamn fun. I had the world's biggest crush on her in season 1 and the few episodes of season 2 where she was around. And it was interesting seeing Tala and Alara exchange a few words. I enjoyed all of Bordas' failed attempts at humor. During his wedding toast, he would just say something completely honest and utterly ruthless, and then say, all kidding aside. It's a little bit like when someone says, "No offense, but ... And you know that whatever they're about to say is going to be the most offensive thing imaginable. And it's almost like, why'd they even bother saying no offense, but, etc. and so forth. But finally, Malloy steps in to save the day. And I guess maybe this is the third time this season he gets to play a tune, and it was the song Secret of Life by James Taylor. And I grew up in a household that played a lot of James Taylor. My parents were just freaks for him back in the 70s. My name is James, and my mother used to play Sweet Baby James to me all the time as a little kid. And there was a nice little bit where Ed and Kelly hold hands. So I do not want to see this show end. But if it has to end, this show will have a very warm place in my heart because they will have stuck the landing and it will have become the best version of itself that it can possibly be. And some people say, oh, well, they should get together every couple of years and do a movie. It's a weird thing where when a serialized story makes the switch to movies, it puts an undue burden on each movie to have the necessary character beats and subplots for every character. And it starts to feel a little, I don't know, like almost like manipulative or forced or artificial, where they're trying to squeeze a season's worth of beats into one story. And I feel like the beauty of a show like The Orville is that you can have an episode that's just about Bordas or an episode that's just about Isaac, and it works, and it wouldn't feel like The Orville again unless it was a season 4. So if it is to come back at some point down the road, I want it to come back as a show, not as flicks. So Seth MacFarlane, hope he goes off and makes a successful TV show out of Ted, then hands off the reins. I mean, Family Guy, he eventually handed off the reins to other people. And then I hope that somebody very, very smart at Disney will recognize that they've got a very rare, precious, new intellectual property. The last 10 years has had an alarmingly alarmingly few number of brand new properties that are fantastic. This is one of the great franchises that's been invented in the last decade. Bring this shit back. And so I'm taking just a quick glance at my notes, and I forgot to mention, it was great seeing that sandwich that got sent forward through time finally arriving. It's almost like this show never forgets what story kind of details have taken place in the past, even if it might take years for a payoff or for it to pay dividends, like we saw with different episodes from past seasons paying off this season. Even a time-traveling sandwich eventually pays huge dividends. But that's just superb writing and superb story construction, and it's so refreshing in comparison to other shows and movies where things just kind of happen and you're expected to forget everything that's happened over like the last 5, 10, 20 minutes, which is very sloppy story construction. But all admiration for story construction aside, it's just so nice in a show that can just lay down one great joke after another, just like little things, like when Malloy is fucking with Lamar and saying that he needs to be part of the ground team on Sargas 4, and him having a total panic attack. I've loved the ride, and I guess now that I just need to go back and just watch it all over again and just appreciate all the peaks and valleys and ups and downs. But I guess if you were to look at the show overall, it's like a stock where over 5 years it just keeps going up and up and up. And it might have some little lightning bolts along the way, but where we have finished with episode 9 of this season, and now the show's at an all-time high, they can drop the mic and they can walk away. So just want to salute all the amazing storytellers, actors, technicians, craftspeople. I mean, from the makeup to the scripts to the direction to the performers, everybody involved. They were just hitting home runs, one home run after another, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege getting to sing this show's praises on this YouTube channel. I will miss it, and I don't expect to find another show that I like as much as this one anytime soon, although Better Call Saul is pretty goddamn good. At any rate, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this sucker up. If you want to talk more about the Orville or sci-fi or any other shows or make any recommendations, please give me a shout on Twitter at Geeking Out. Please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, and maybe sharing this video with anybody who you think might enjoy it. But can't thank you enough for watching this video. Can't thank you enough for supporting this channel with all the previous videos that you've watched on this topic, and hopefully we'll all find a show that we like just as much in the future to talk about together. So that's all I've got to say. I hope everyone has a great weekend, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.